Every year, millions of gardeners spend money trying to fix their soil. They buy bags of fertilizer, liquid boosters, root stimulants, bloom enhancers, plant food spikes, and powders with complicated numbers on the label. They bring them home hoping the season will finally be the one where everything grows bigger, greener, faster, and healthier. Sometimes those products help. But Hubert has learned something after many years in the garden. A lot of people are not really feeding their soil. They are only feeding their anxiety. Because when a garden struggles, the first instinct is often to buy something. A yellow leaf. Buy a bottle. Small tomatoes. Buy a bag. Slow growth. Buy a stronger formula. Weak seedlings. Buy another product. Meanwhile, right outside the door, and often right inside the house, there are free materials being thrown away every day that could have helped build better soil all along. That is the strange thing about modern gardening. People pay money to replace what they already had for free. They bag up leaves and throw them away. They rake away grass clippings. They dump kitchen scraps into the trash. They ignore old manure sources. They treat weeds as useless. They overlook compost. They wash away nutrients with water. And then they go shopping for fertility in plastic bags. Now, Hubert is not saying every purchased fertilizer is bad. Sometimes a crop needs help. Sometimes a soil test reveals a real deficiency. Sometimes a gardener needs a quick correction. There is a place for targeted products when used wisely. But for most backyard gardeners, the bigger opportunity is not buying more. It is wasting less. It is learning how to turn the free things around you into steady, natural support for the soil. Because once the soil improves, everything changes. Water holds better. Roots grow deeper. Plants recover faster. Microbial life becomes stronger. And the garden starts feeding itself more effectively over time. Today, Hubert is going to show you 12 free things that can feed your garden. Some are common. Some are overlooked. Some are powerful only when used the right way. And some can do harm if used carelessly. So this is not just a list of scraps and leftovers. It is a practical guide to using them wisely. If you are tired of spending too much and still feeling like your soil is not where it should be, this video may save you more than money. It may help you finally understand what your garden has been asking for all along. Before we look at the 12 free things, Hubert wants to explain one important idea. Plants do not only need fertilizer. They need living, functioning soil. That may sound simple, but it changes everything. Many beginners imagine soil as a lifeless material that only holds roots upright while fertilizer does the real work. But good soil is much more than that. It stores water. It holds air. It supports microbes. It breaks down organic matter. It buffers stress. It feeds roots gradually. It creates the environment where plants can actually use nutrients. If that system is weak, then even expensive fertilizer may only give temporary results. You may get fast green growth for a while. But if the soil stays compacted, dry, lifeless, or depleted, the garden remains fragile. That is why Hubert always talks about feeding the soil first. Now, there are 3 broad ways free garden materials help. First, some add nutrients directly. Things like manure, compost, coffee grounds, and certain soak plant feeds bring fertility into the soil. Second, some build structure. Leaves, grass clippings, cardboard, and organic matter help soil hold moisture, soften compaction, and create better texture. Third, some support biology. As organic matter breaks down, microbes, fungi, worms, and other life forms begin doing the invisible work that makes a garden healthier over time. That is the real secret. A strong garden is usually not built by one miracle ingredient. It is built by layers. A little compost, a little mulch, a little leaf mold, some kitchen scraps handled properly, a bit of manure at the right time, moisture held in the soil, organic matter returned instead of thrown away. That lead approach is what makes free fertility so powerful. Now, one warning before we continue. Free does not mean safe in any amount. Wood ash can be helpful, but too much can cause problems. Fresh manure can burn plants or carry pathogens if misused. Weeds can be useful, but seed heads can create trouble. Cardboard can help suppress weeds, but too much thick dry material can also affect water movement if used badly. So the goal is not to dump everything into the garden and hope for the best. The goal is to understand how each free material works and where it fits. Once you understand that, you stop seeing yard waste and kitchen leftovers as trash. You start seeing them as stored fertility. The first free thing that feeds your garden is compost. This is the king of free fertility. If Hubert had to choose only one long-term answer for improving a backyard garden without spending much money, compost would be at the top of the list every time. Why? Because compost is not just fertilizer. It is soil builder, moisture helper, structure improver, microbial support, and long-term resilience all in one. A bagged fertilizer may add nutrients for a while. Compost changes the soil itself. Good compost comes from a mix of green materials and brown materials breaking down over time. Greens are things like kitchen scraps, fresh grass, plant trimmings, and soft green weeds. Browns are leaves, shredded cardboard, dry stems, and straw-like materials. Get a decent balance, keep it moist but not soaked, give it some air, and nature does the rest. Now, many beginners think compost is difficult. It can be as simple or as complicated as you want. A fancy 3-bin system is fine. A pile in the corner works too. A lidded container can work. A heap of chopped material turned every so often can work. The main mistake is trying to make compost perfect before starting. Hubert would rather see a rough compost pile started this week than a perfect system still being planned 6 months from now. Finished compost looks dark, crumbly, earthy, and no longer resembles the ingredients you started with. That is what you want. Use it around vegetables, in planting holes, on raised beds, under mulch, around fruit trees, in containers mixed with other materials, or as a top dressing through the season. What Hubert loves most about compost is that it turns waste into future growth. Your garden trimmings become next year's fertility. Your kitchen scraps become next season's greens. Your fallen leaves become richer soil. That is not just good gardening. That is a smarter way to live. The second free thing is grass clippings. Now, this one sounds simple because it is simple, but many people use it badly and then blame the material. Fresh grass clippings can be incredibly useful in the garden when applied in the right way. They contain nitrogen, they break down fairly quickly, and they make an excellent thin mulch layer that helps hold moisture and suppress weeds. The key word is thin. That is where people go wrong. If you dump a thick wet mat of fresh grass around your plants, it can pack down, turn slimy, block airflow, and create an unpleasant mess. But if you apply grass clippings in light layers and let them dry between applications, they become very helpful. Hubert especially likes using untreated grass clippings around thirsty summer crops, on paths between rows, or as part of a compost pile where they add valuable green material. Another good method is layering grass clippings with brown materials like leaves, straw, or shredded cardboard. That keeps the material more balanced and prevents it from matting too much. Now, one important warning. Do not use grass clippings from lawns treated with herbicides, weed killers, or other chemicals that may harm your vegetables. If you are not sure what was sprayed, do not risk it. Grass clippings are most useful when they are clean, chemical-free, and used in moderation. Hubert likes them because they are one of the easiest fertility sources to collect. Most people mow and throw them away. But those clippings came from the soil, and they still hold value. When you return them to the garden, you are bringing part of that fertility back into the cycle. The third free thing is fallen leaves. If Hubert sees bags of autumn leaves sitting on the roadside waiting to be thrown away, he does not see trash. He sees future soil. Leaves are one of the greatest free gifts a gardener can get. They are brown material for compost. They are mulch. They are the raw material for leaf mold. And over time, they become rich organic matter that improves soil structure beautifully. Now, leaves are not a quick fertilizer in the same way manure or compost may be. Their strength is slower, gentler, and longer lasting. They help build the body of the soil. This matters more than people realize. A lot of poor garden soil is not simply hungry. It is empty of organic matter. It dries too fast, compacts too easily, and does not support enough life. Leaves help rebuild that missing layer. Hubert loves shredded leaves most of all. If you run leaves over with a mower or shred them before use, they break down faster and stay in place better. Shredded leaves make excellent mulch around beds, especially when topped with a little compost or used under another material. Whole leaves can also be useful, but they may mat together if piled too thickly. That is why some preparation helps. And then there is leaf mold, one of Hubert's favorite underrated soil builders. Leaf mold is what you get when leaves break down mostly on their own over time. It is soft, dark, moisture-loving material that makes soil lighter, richer, and more sponge-like. The mistake people make is thinking leaves are messy because they are not instantly beautiful. But the garden is not improved by beauty alone. It is improved by biology. A pile of leaves today can become better soil next year. That is a trade Hubert will take every time. The fourth free thing is kitchen scraps. This is where many backyard gardens begin waking up to the fact that fertility is flowing through the house every single day. Vegetable peels, fruit scraps, outer leaves, spent herbs, plant trimmings, soft leftovers from produce preparation. All of these can become garden feed if handled properly. Now, Hubert wants to be clear. Kitchen scraps are most useful through composting, burial in the right system, worm bins, or careful processing. Simply tossing random scraps on top of the garden can attract pests, smell unpleasant, and create more trouble than benefit. But when used well, kitchen scraps are a steady stream of fertility. This is one reason Hubert believes every serious home gardener should think beyond the garden bed and into the kitchen. The two spaces are not separate. The kitchen consumes food, and the garden can receive part of that cycle back. Banana peels, for example, can be composted. Vegetable peels can be composted. Fruit scraps can be composted. Some materials can even be chopped and buried in a future planting trench if done correctly and well ahead of planting. The mistake is using oily cooked leftovers, meat, dairy, or pest-attracting materials in an open casual pile unless you have a system designed for that. Hubert usually keeps it simpler. Plant-based scraps, chopped if possible, moved into compost or a controlled system. Over time, that daily habit adds up. A handful today, a bowl tomorrow, a small container every few days. That may not feel dramatic, but across a season it becomes significant. And the soil notices. Hubert likes kitchen scraps because they remind people that fertility is not rare. It is already passing through your hands. The question is whether you are throwing it away or returning it to the cycle. The fifth free thing is coffee grounds. Coffee grounds are one of the most talked about free garden materials, and for good reason. Many households produce them daily, and coffee shops often give them away in large quantities. That sounds perfect, and it can be useful. But Hubert wants to slow people down a little here, because coffee grounds are another material that gets praised so much that many gardeners stop thinking carefully. Used properly, coffee grounds are helpful. They add organic matter, contribute some nitrogen, and can support compost piles very well. They are especially good when mixed with other materials instead of used heavily on their own. Used badly, they can become a soggy dense layer that crusts over, or simply create an imbalance if you pile on too much in one spot. Hubert's favorite way to use coffee grounds is in compost, where they mix with browns like leaves and cardboard. He also likes small amounts worked into mulch layers or lightly scattered around plants as part of a broader system. But lightly is the important word. A thin sprinkle? Fine. A useful compost ingredient? Very good. A thick wet blanket over a bed? Not smart. Another nice thing about coffee grounds is access. If you do not drink much coffee yourself, local cafes may still give you used grounds for free. That turns a waste product into a garden resource. The mistake is treating coffee grounds like a miracle fertilizer. They are not magic. They are one useful ingredient among many. And that is exactly how Hubert likes to use free materials, not as miracles, but as reliable pieces in a smart system. The sixth free thing is eggshells. Eggshells are one of those materials almost every home has, yet many people either throw them away or use them in ways that do very little. Now, eggshells do contain calcium, which is important in the garden. But Hubert wants to be honest again. Eggshells are not a fast rescue treatment for every problem people blame on calcium. They break down slowly, especially when used in larger pieces. So the right way to think about eggshells is not as instant fertilizer. Think of them as a slow-return mineral input. Hubert likes to dry them, crush them well, and add them to compost, worm bins, or planting mixes in moderation. The finer they are crushed, the more surface area they have, and the more useful they become over time. If you simply toss whole half shells around the garden, you may get less benefit and more visible clutter. But properly prepared eggshells can be a sensible way to return calcium into the long-term soil cycle. Another reason people like them is that they are clean, easy to collect, and always available in many households. It is one of those small habits that adds up across a season. Can eggshells solve every blossom end rot problem on tomatoes? No, not in the way internet myths often suggest. Blossom end rot is often tied to watering inconsistency and plant stress as much as calcium availability. So do not treat eggshells like a magic cure. But used steadily and realistically, they are still worth keeping. Hubert likes materials that are free, safe, simple, and useful over time. Eggshells fit that category well. The seventh free thing is wood ash. Now we come to a material that can be very useful and very badly misused. Wood ash contains minerals and can be helpful in certain soils, especially when used lightly. But it is not something Hubert sprinkles around casually without thought. Why? Because wood ash is alkaline. That means too much can shift soil pH and create problems, especially for plants that do not like sweeter soil. So the first rule is this: use only clean ash from untreated, unpainted, natural wood. No charcoal briquettes with additives.
No burn trash. No painted lumber.
No mystery ash from questionable sources. The second rule is moderation. A little wood ash can be helpful. Too much can overwhelm the soil. Hubert likes using it in small amounts around beds that can benefit, or mixed into compost in limited quantities, never dumped thickly in one place. It is especially important to avoid heavy ash use around acid-loving plants like blueberries. They will not thank you for it. Hubert also prefers to apply ash when rain or watering can help move it gently into the system, rather than letting a dusty layer blow around everywhere. Wood ash is one of those traditional garden materials that older generations often used because they understood moderation instinctively. They did not treat it like free powder to throw everywhere. They used it carefully where it made sense. That is the lesson here too. Free fertility is only helpful when used with some judgment. The eighth free thing is manure. This one can be incredibly valuable if you have access to it from chickens, rabbits, horses, goats, cows, or other suitable sources. But like wood ash, manure rewards knowledge and punishes carelessness. Manure is powerful because it brings nutrients and organic matter into the soil. It can be one of the fastest ways to improve fertility in a serious garden. But not all manure is ready to use directly. Fresh manure can burn plants. It can also carry weed seeds or food safety concerns, depending on the source and how it is used. That is why Hubert prefers composted or aged manure in most situations, especially around food crops. Chicken manure is especially strong. Wonderful, but hot. It often needs more time and more care before it is garden ready. Rabbit manure is often gentler and sometimes used more directly by some gardeners, though Hubert still likes caution and observation. Horse manure can be useful, but may contain weed seeds. Cow manure can be excellent when aged well. So the real question is not, is manure good? The question is, what kind, how old, and how am I using it? Hubert likes manure best in compost systems, autumn bed preparation, and pre-planting fertility building. Used that way, it becomes part of the soil rather than a harsh shock to plant roots. If you keep chickens yourself, this is where the homestead starts getting interesting. Bedding, droppings, and coop cleanouts can become future fertility if composted properly. That is one of Hubert's favorite cycles in the garden. The animals feed the compost. The compost feeds the soil. The soil feeds the plants. And the plants help feed the household. That is real backyard resilience. The ninth free thing is weeds, used the right way. Now, Hubert knows some gardeners may laugh at this. They spend half the season fighting weeds, and here he is saying weeds can feed the garden. But listen carefully. Many weeds are simply fast-growing plants pulling nutrients from the soil. If you cut them before they set seed and use them properly, they can become mulch, compost material, or soaked plant feed. That means the very plants you were pulling out can return some of that fertility back to the garden instead of going to waste. The key, of course, is timing. If weeds are full of mature seeds, and you casually spread them around, you are planting next season's headache. That is not smart. If weeds have invasive roots that can regrow from fragments, you also need more caution. Hubert's favorite use is young soft weeds without seed heads. Pull them, let them wilt in the sun if needed, then add them to compost or use them in controlled soaked plant feed. This is especially satisfying because it changes the relationship with the garden. Instead of seeing every weed only as an enemy, you begin asking, can part of this be turned into fertility? That is a much smarter question. Now, not every weed should be used casually, and identification matters. But many common soft annual weeds, cut young, can absolutely become part of the organic cycle. Hubert likes this approach because it reduces waste, lowers hauling, and builds the habit of observing rather than reacting blindly. A weed with seeds is a warning. A weed without seeds may be a resource. That difference matters. The 10th free thing is compost tea or soaked plant feed. Now, Hubert is using this term in a practical backyard sense, not in a laboratory or commercial precision sense. In many homesteads, gardeners soak compost, manure, weeds, comfrey, or other approved materials in water and use that liquid as a gentle nutrient feed. When done sensibly, this can be a useful way to extract fertility into water and apply it to the garden. Comfrey tea is especially famous. Weed tea is common. Diluted compost-based liquids are also popular. The main advantage is accessibility. If you already have useful plant material and a container, you can make a liquid feed source without spending much. But Hubert wants to keep expectations realistic. These liquids are not magic, and they can smell terrible if handled badly. So the key is moderation, common sense, and proper use. Do not splash filthy, rotting liquid everywhere carelessly. Use suitable plant materials. Dilute if needed. Apply to soil rather than soaking edible leaves unnecessarily. And do not pretend every homemade tea is identical in strength. Hubert-like soaked plant feeds most when he wants a gentle boost for hungry beds or a practical use for chopped green material. They can fit especially well in a low-cost garden system. But again, the strength of this approach is not perfection. It is circulation. The plants fed the liquid. The liquid returns to the soil. And the cycle continues. The 11th free thing is cardboard and plain paper used as mulch and soil building support. Now, this one does not feed plants in the same direct way compost or manure might. But Hubert still includes it because feeding a garden is not only about nutrients. It is also about protecting the soil so nutrients stay where they matter. Cardboard and plain brown paper can be excellent for suppressing weeds, holding moisture, and creating a slow breakdown layer that supports the soil underneath. This is especially helpful when starting new beds, covering paths, or reclaiming grassy ground without heavy digging. The key is choosing the right kind. Plain brown cardboard is best. Remove heavy tape, glossy coatings, and excessive printing where possible. Avoid heavily colored or plastic-coated material. Hubert often uses cardboard under mulch when creating new beds. Lay it down, wet it well, cover it with compost, leaves, grass clippings, or another mulch layer, and let time do some of the work. This method does something very important. It stops the soil from losing water so quickly and slows weed competition. That alone helps fertility stay available to plants instead of being stolen by unwanted growth. People sometimes underestimate that. Keeping nutrients in the root zone and reducing competition is part of feeding a garden. The mistake is using thick dry cardboard and leaving it exposed, where water may run off instead of soaking through. Another mistake is treating it like a decorative surface instead of a buried layer in a living system. Used well, cardboard becomes a quiet partner in building better ground. The 12th free thing is nutrient water from certain systems, such as pond cleanout water, aquarium water, or sometimes the settled nutrient-rich water from garden containers and rain systems. Now, Hubert wants to be careful here. This only applies when the water source is safe and sensible. Aquarium water, for example, often contains diluted nutrients from fish waste and can be very useful for non-sensitive garden use. Pond cleanout water may contain organic fertility if the system is healthy and not contaminated. Even certain settled container waters used in the garden can carry useful material back into the soil. What Hubert likes about this is the mindset. Instead of thinking only about dry inputs, you begin noticing that even water may carry fertility. Fish systems feed plants. Organic particles settle in barrels. Garden systems hold nutrients in places people often overlook. Now, you should still use judgment. Do not use contaminated water. Do not pour foul, diseased, or chemically tainted water onto food crops. Do not assume all standing water is useful. And do not create mosquito breeding sites in the name of saving nutrients. A healthy aquarium water change used on ornamental beds or certain vegetables can be helpful. A safe pond cleanout can be useful. But the source matters. Hubert includes this because it teaches an important lesson. Fertility often moves through a homestead in quiet forms. Water is one of them. And a smart gardener learns to notice where the value is flowing before it gets dumped away. Now that we have looked at the 12 free things, Hubert wants to step back and show you how real fertility is built in a strong backyard system. Because the answer is not choosing one favorite material and using it for everything. The answer is layering. Compost builds the foundation. Leaves and cardboard protect the soil. Grass clippings help hold moisture. Kitchen scraps feed the compost. Coffee grounds support the mix. Eggshells return minerals slowly. Manure adds strength when aged properly. Weeds become resources if handled at the right time. Liquid feeds give occasional support. Safe nutrient water closes quiet loops. This is what makes a garden feel alive. Nothing is wasted. Nothing has to be perfect. But everything has a place. If Hubert had to design the simplest fertility system for a beginner, it would look like this. Start a compost pile. Save your leaves. Use grass clippings lightly as mulch. Keep clean kitchen scraps out of the trash and move them into compost. Collect eggshells and coffee grounds. Use cardboard under mulch for new beds. And if you have access to aged manure, add it carefully before planting or in compost. That alone would change many gardens dramatically over time. The mistake most people make is trying to jump straight to visible plant growth without building the invisible system underneath. But the garden always notices what is happening below the surface. And what happens below the surface decides more than people think. Before we finish, Hubert wants to save you from a few common mistakes. The first mistake is using too much of one free material. Too much wood ash. Too much fresh grass in one mat. Too much coffee grounds in one place. Too much fresh manure near active crops. Free does not mean unlimited. The second mistake is using contaminated materials. Sprayed grass clippings, painted wood ash, dirty water, questionable manure, greasy kitchen waste in open piles. These things can create problems quickly. The third mistake is expecting instant results from slow building materials. Leaves, eggshells, cardboard, and compost systems work over time. If you treat them like emergency fertilizer, you may become disappointed for the wrong reason. The fourth mistake is skipping compost and trying to use scraps directly in messy ways. Compost organizes fertility. It turns chaos into usefulness. The fifth mistake is forgetting moisture. Many organic inputs only become powerful when the soil has enough moisture and biological activity to break them down. Dry, dead soil does not transform materials well. And the sixth mistake is the biggest of all. Treating fertility like a purchase instead of a cycle. A good garden is not constantly rescued from outside. It is gradually strengthened from within. That is the mindset Hubert wants for every gardener. So, friends, those are 12 free things that can feed your garden. Compost, grass clippings, fallen leaves, kitchen scraps, coffee grounds, eggshells, wood ash, manure, weeds used the right way, compost tea and soaked plant feeds, cardboard and paper mulch, and safe nutrient-rich water from the right systems. Now, Hubert does not want you to rush outside and throw all 12 into one bed. That would miss the point. The lesson here is not random dumping. The lesson is awareness. Your home produces fertility. Your yard produces fertility. Your animals may produce fertility. Even your waste stream may be full of value. Once you see that clearly, gardening changes. You stop looking at every problem as something to solve with a purchase. You start building cycles. A compost pile becomes more meaningful. Leaves become worth saving. Kitchen scraps become a habit. Mulch becomes part of your thinking. And the garden begins to feel less like a hungry project and more like a living system. That is one of the most satisfying feelings a gardener can have. To know that your soil is getting better not because you spent more money, but because you finally learned how to waste less. If this video helped you, subscribe to Lush Green Garden and join Hubert for more practical ways to grow more food, save money, improve poor soil, and make your backyard work.